Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Live Chat. And today's special guest, Mr. Simon Crabb, tuning in from where are you right now, Simon? London?
I'm in sunny Hastings, which is south coast, seaside, so south of London, about an hour or two. Yeah.
Is that I noticed that Steve Mallender is also going down to Brighton and stuff. Is that sort of like the desired place to end up one day if you grow up in the UK?
I don't know. I don't know. I think a lot of people come here because they're escaping various places and they go as far as they can until they hit the sea, then they kind of have to stop, So,
but it does have better weather down there, I've heard.
Yeah, but it's England, so it's variable. No, it's a good kind of weirdo community and lots of kind of musicians and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's good.
It's great to be in a great area. Put yourself in a productive environment or just a soothing environment. Going to be the thing to do. But I'd like to thank you for joining me today. I have to say, over time, it's almost 38 years or something since I've experienced your music. I've just never not been a fan. Everything you've ever made has somehow struck a chord within me. So something you do has worked immensely on my psyche and my persona. So I want to thank you for that, first of all. Also, another thing Steve Mallender said in his music theory thing that he had written is that music is often open to being reinterpreted in the setting that it's listened to in. Could you have ever imagined that the music that you were making in the day could be interpreted by kids the other side of the world and then sort of become the soundtrack for what their life may be, as different as it may be from what you guys had originally intended?
Well, the short answer is no. When we first started, we never imagined any kind of audience whatsoever. We just did it because we were interested in it, and if anyone else liked it, we all thought they were a bit strange. Maybe there was something a bit wrong with them, but they liked. There was never an intended audience at all, So it was quite a shock when people actually bought records and wrote us letters and said that they liked it. I was doing an interview on Thursday actually, and we were talking about this, and I was saying that our view of an audience was something to be provoked, something to be irritated, maybe. They weren't supposed to like it.
It's a completely different time period, pre-internet, and the way you find out about music and a scene in general is often something that you don't expect. But I'll never forget the day that I was exposed to this album. I've said it many times. The Elephant. Yeah. It kind of like said to me, I don't think I've walked away from listening to an album and thought like, but this album is about to change my life. Figuratively, in the sense that you guys all supplied your contact addresses on it.
Mm.
So initially I thought, well, there was this Clem magazine that was written by Alex Douglas at the time, which was really the only way us in Canada could find, a source for this information even. But this was like a secondary level of new info. And also it came with music that basically pointed and said, this was a whole new different aesthetic. It was almost as vibrant as, for me anyways, as discovering punk. I felt like not only am I hearing something that feels outside corporate restraints and outside the ideal of commercialism and all the trappings of the industry, but it was like a path that I could see myself and kind of like forgive me for saying, but the music that I was dabbling in at the time, I had not made any release yet. I kind of felt a common ground with you guys.
Mm.
Instantly sent you a letter. It was interesting is that you responded. This is in
well.
there it is.
Right, great.
So right away in 1984, this is in not right away. Yeah, 1984, where you've hit me up a couple of times where I've asked about your band and kind of like alluded to how it made an effect on me. And I guess I ended up in the
Oh, yeah.
Bourbonese Qualk 1984 annual report with the letter there that's actually at the very beginning of Network, which any of the fans of Skinny Puppy will know was the first record label that we were on. But essentially what I really like about this is like the time capsule, and basically that comes with a piece of vinyl and the music therein.
I think what was interesting about that record is that it was, I guess, a kind of accumulation of the cassette scene, which had been going on for about 5 years before that, which was, and it was kind of seen as a kind of a sellout, really, because the cassette scene was supposed to be anti-vinyl. You know, it was supposed to be free, and everyone was just basically swapping cassettes, which is great, you know, because it was really democratic, and there was no sort of value judgments on it. And vinyl was seen as trying to be a bit kind of arrogant and commercial. So when that came out, there was quite a big discussion about, well, you know, this is the end of it. So it's kind of killed it off, because suddenly big business is interested in this sort of thing, which is, you know, sounds a bit ludicrous now. But you know, Dave Henderson, who compiled it, who was like, I suppose the evangelist of the scene, he also supported a lot of the kind of cassette stuff that was going on as well. But yeah, that was what, to me, that's what that means. It was,
yeah, Dave Henderson in Sounds magazine was always the man that we went to and trusted to find new information. And thus, yeah, I mean, we kind of saw him as like the exposer of the scene, you know, being so far away. And I think Gary Livermore as well, with his Rising from the Red Sands series, which I kind of thought that you guys should have been on, but it's kind of like the extension of the Elephant Table album.
Yeah, yeah.
The cassette scene was so, I don't know, it's just so perfect in the way that, you know, you had to get it through the mail, and the package arrival and the discovery of what was contained was always so exciting. The exchange of the ideas was so primitive in the sense that it was a direct connection with the people instead of a middleman and all the rest of this. It was so attractive.
Yeah, and if you didn't like it, then you just erased it and sent it off and got some more on the cassette, you know. So it was up to you what you did with it, which I thought was great.
A lot of people, when I've mentioned that I was going to speaking to you, are very interested in what the scene was like in those times in London that create so many vibrant bands that seemingly were such a part of a collective or a scene. Did you feel that it was a collective at that time, or was it just someone like, you know, so many great bands that seemingly came out all at the same time, especially noted on the Elephant Table album and the rest of them?
Kind of yes and no. I mean, I think we didn't know really any of those on the Elephant Table album. I think when I moved to London, I met Nocturnal Emission, so Nigel, who you know, right? Who was basically our kind of mentor when we arrived in London. You know, we were really young. I was like 17, 18. So, you know, and they were 24 or something like that. So that you know, that was our main connection. But no, we didn't really know any of the others. I mean, we were aware of their existence, but whether or not it was a scene, I don't know. I mean, when we took over the ambulance station in '84, I guess it was, I mean, most of our kind of scene was people from Crass, you know, so it was a lot of kind of anarcho-punk stuff. Very little of it was what you would, I guess you're going to use the I word, the industrial scene. But, you know, we were aware of them, but we certainly didn't hang out. We didn't kind of know them that well.
Is that the ambulance station there?
Yeah, my bedroom was on the the second floor from the top, the door on the left. That's the one. Yeah,
Blue door.
yeah. That was my bedroom. Yeah.
How did you guys go about acquiring a bass like this? Was it a squat, or was it something that you...
Yeah, it was squatted. Yeah, I mean, London was a very different place in those days. You know, it was mostly empty. You know, it's not like you didn't have the sort of land value that you do now. But basically, this was in a very rough part of London where even if there was land value, it wasn't very high. But basically, it was a bunch of French anarchists who had originally taken it over, but they were getting a lot of trouble from the local neo-Nazi skinheads, so they asked us if that we would take it over, you know. And I said, yeah, why not? And basically, I spent a week there by myself fighting off neo-Nazi skinheads until I got reinforcements to come in.
They had to get a clear house before you could move in and get it going.
Yeah.
Did Nigel live there too? Was that 90? Is that 90 Lilford Road?
No, that was it. That was near Brixton. That was Camberwell, Brixton. No, he never did. No, he prefers his home comforts. It was a bit too heavy for him.
It was kind of nice to see that he had been making some little replicas of the old buildings that he had been living in. It was kind of great. It's like extreme detail of the old buildings and stuff. I mean, it's the vibrancy of the scene. Is that the same ambulance station that would have been known as like the Crispy Ambulance, sort of?
No, I think you're mixing up two different things. I think that was a Factory Records thing. No,
okay.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I think, you know, we had to go by like legend over in Canada. It was like a, story based on stories and stuff like that. So basically, the history, it's kind of very interesting. And I think everyone thinks, that this scene possibly, which you must get asked about a ton of times, at the time, obviously it wouldn't have had a moniker of industrial music yet or any of that nature. What was the inspiration that you guys had to make, okay, let's go with this, to make Laughing Afternoon, what I consider to be the quintessential album of Bourbonese, a gem?
Well, like I said, we didn't play to an audience. We didn't conceive of an audience. We didn't have like anything in our heads, and we also didn't set out to do something like. I guess most bands, this is a generalization, but I guess most bands, they have influences. They like the Rolling Stones or whatever, and they think, all right, let's get together and we'll do something a bit like the Rolling Stones, but maybe it turns out a bit different. I mean, we never had that sort of thing. We didn't think, oh, we like this lot, so let's do something like that. I mean, we basically started off as kind of me and my brother in the bedroom, just messing around with tape recorders and just manipulating sounds and just being obsessed with making weird noises, and eventually it turned into something that you might call music or whatever, We bought some very, very cheap instruments and put it all together, and eventually, evolved from that. So there was never really a kind of preconception of it as being like something or for some people. So like I said, we were quite surprised when we released that. It was kind of almost like a joke, which was that, we'll make an album and no one's ever going to buy it, and that's fine. That's great. But so I was surprised people did. So people like you, apparently.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like one of those things where consistently I have put this album on as one of those things, where you have a guest over and stuff and you've got a record collection, you pull a record out and put it on, and consistently people will be like, what's this? When was this released? And then, they need to know the full story if they haven't heard of you yet. And then I'll find that, it's consistent that anyone that has come over is like kind of like moved by certain music that they'll hear and inspired. And I'm proud to you guys are kind of like my secret weapon. If you haven't heard of you, it's kind of like put it on and guaranteed people are going to be like, wow, what is this? This is so great. And I have to say that the VOD box set that was released, I just acquired that recently, and I hadn't had that yet. Is the initial recordings that you're speaking about with your brother contained on this? I noticed that there's some just credited to you in the inception period here.
I lost that question. It got cut off.
Is the first recordings that you made with your brother, as you were saying, contained on the box set here?
Yeah.
Because I found the consistency not to waver off. It's not like you started at a different point and then came back. It was kind of like, it definitely heavier, kind of like more I could say more crass punk related in that sense. I can see that inspiration, but I can still hear you. And so you seemingly have feeling, from you've had a pretty clear vision about what you've wanted. Was it something that you felt that you needed to express, or was it truly just luck that you achieved your own sound just naturally like that?
I mean, you could look at it another way, which is that we never developed, which is, I suppose, again, most bands, they go through a phase where they do something and they either give up pretty quickly or they have some success, but their success is manipulated and they're kind of produced, and their sound is kind of focused in a way by somebody else, because it's commercially successful or something. So, we never went through that sort of phase of development. We just carried on doing what we always did, and whether or not it was good or bad. So, yeah, I think there's two ways of looking at it. I suspect it's probably true that we weren't that influenced by commerce. I mean, record labels did try to get us to do some kind of funky records and single version, or do an album which was maybe a bit more commercial and kind of with a beat on it or something, but we never did. So it kind of stayed the same, I guess. But
yeah, that's admirable. There's so much pressure, at certain times, and sticking to your guns is always evident in your history of Bourbonese Qualk. When Hope came out, I was really happy to see, Dave Henderson with his multi-star review, and again following another legendary for me, and I just call it legendary because it ages like fine wine to me. This stuff. Do you find that yourself, that when you look back on it, do you enjoy it more as time goes on?
I mean, to be honest, I don't listen to it at all. And for a long time, I was a bit embarrassed by it, really, which is, I thought it was sort of a bit crude or something, and that that I could always do something better. And I think that's always been the case. I think whatever I've done I've always thought that the next thing is going to be better and is better, and I kind of saw that as kind of an early sort of larval stage.
I think that equipment along the way and your access to equipment can always be like kind of a factor as how your music turns out. Were you the guy that was doing most of the engineering and mixing? So how did you learn how to do like the basics to get your albums to the point where you could release them in those days?
Well, it was simple because we had incredibly simple equipment and very cheap equipment. I mean,
like what? People love to hear the geeky.
I mean, it was junk, basically. So what do we have? Had like a really cheapo guitar, which would maybe cost 20 quid or something. A really crappy bass guitar as well. We had a half decent drum kit. We had Nigel from Nocturnal Emissions 808 drum machine that got nicked at some point. And the only keyboard we had was a Casio VL tone, those like they're pretty much a calculator with a keyboard sort of thing. And a bunch of effects pedals. That's about it. But I think our secret weapon was what's called a Korg stage echo, which was a tape echo, basically a big tape loop where you could do a minute of taping. So you could do kind of real time overdubbing, and that's what it kind of, I think, gave a lot to our sound. I mean, for recording, basically we had a really old TAC 4-track, which was, I think, sold to us by Nigel, and he bought it from SBK, and they got it from Throbbing Gristle. So it went through this kind of hand-me-downs. By the time we got it, like hardly any of the channels worked properly and anything.
Perfect.
We didn't have a mixing desk, but I soldered together like a little slider thing from the outputs of the 4-track, and that was it. So on those two albums, that's all we had. So basic stuff.
Really, really good job though with what you had. I guess that Korg stage echo, just golden in the sense that I always liked how out front your effects were, especially your delay, your feedback, and also your editing skills. As far as like your music has always been somewhat collisions. So there'd be an idea that will collide into another, but really make a statement.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to that kind of vision of the audience as being something to provoke. So, you know, you have like a nice little tune going along, you think, what will we do now? You know, let's cut it straight into something that's completely different, and then keep on doing that. It's like you can never sort of rest. You kind of have this slightly irritating structure to it. So, I mean, it was never really thought that. It was never kind of conscious. It was just a sort of way of thinking. So, you know, you continually have this disruptive. I think, again, I guess the one thing that marked us out was that there was never like a set style, you know, always kind of jumped between. It could easily have been lots of different bands playing. And again, I like that idea that there's no kind of adopted genre or style, you know, it's kind of confusing and disruptive, and that kind of pissed people off. They were like, oh, why don't you just keep doing it like that or doing like that? You know, then it'd be much nicer.
I really like your guitar style. I'm assuming that the guitar is you.
Yeah.
The guitar style, it's just like this kind of like Spanish guitar, but like almost haunted Spanish guitar, but just perfect. And then with the right aesthetic of the way that you guys mic'd your drums, they're a little like amped, almost a little, I don't know, just like perfect. I mean, you could be in a studio now and almost like want to obtain that sound. It'd be like, I could.
Yeah.
Many times in my history, I've heard people say, if they thought something sounded good, they said, "Oh, that's the total BQ sound." And I thought, like, well, it means ripe effects, great sounding original drums, and some classic touching melody that can, like, all of a sudden, like, take you away. But it's not necessarily a style, as you say. So, I mean, essentially, I can't imagine back in the day someone saying to you, wow, this music is so unattractive. It's so unappealing. I mean, for me, it's the opposite. It's like,
yeah. But I mean, you know, so going back to kind of what the scene was like. I mean, if you're talking about the 80s and the kind of late 80s and the early 80s, I mean, to us, we were kind of very isolated culturally. I mean, it was, you know, it's kind of Thatcher times in Britain, and it was the kind of dominant culture was this kind of 80s tacky sort of pop music like Madonna and I don't know, can't even remember the names of Spandau Ballet, you know, these kind of people, you know, that was just ever present everywhere you went. It was that kind of stuff. And what we were doing was the absolute antithesis of that. And kind of, it was hard work, you know, because it was such a dominant culture and we were so out on a limb that it was a continual struggle to kind of get noticed or to actually do anything. So the idea that it was a kind of this scene of vibrant artists and musicians kind of working, is kind of a bit alien, I think, to us. In those days, we would have been quite surprised that we were having this conversation almost, you know.
Well, it's interesting because in Canada at that time, it seemed so, shall I say, peaceful, or sort of like a bit naive, in the sense that you guys, in your world, there was a lot of political activism and anti-capitalist stop the city riots and sort of like awareness of like government.
Yeah.
And that was playing a part into the music. And that was something that we obviously didn't have that wasn't going on, but we were aware that this is something that, we had to pay attention to. But how much of that was an important aspect of what went into the music? Were you trying to really make a point about your feelings, or was it purely musical?
Oh, no, it was entirely political. I mean, it was, we saw ourselves at war with the state, if you like. It might come across a bit naive now, but, music was a fundamental aspect of politics. To be able to make political change, you had to have a culture that was different. You couldn't do that within Spandau Ballet or whatever they're called, because they were a capitalist invention. and of course they were. It was obvious that it was all about yachts and bankers and drinking champagne and girls and all the rest of it. So yeah, I mean, it was absolutely fundamental, and we lived that every day. And the Albion station was the centre of Stop the City and any of these kind of anti-capitalist demonstrations. And every week we got raided by the police and dragged off to police cells and interrogated and stuff. So yeah, it was absolutely central to everything we did. It still is actually.
I mean, we were always told stories that made actually the UK sound kind of scary to the people. So it kind of like your music kind of came with a little bit of almost like tension, even though it might not have been contained. So I think it was very effective in conveying the point of individualism and forming your own perspectives. Preparing for power is like kind of like preparing yourself. I mean, we're headed towards a situation where by the time when Donald Trump came along, you must have just been completely like unsurprised by that, and or were you? How is this whole rise of the whole political spectrum affected you?
Well, that's a complex question. How long have you got? Well, I mean, of course, Trump was no surprise at all. But,
absolutely.
I mean, but I guess the shocking thing is he is actually not that different from pretty much any of the American presidents that you've had. I know you're Canadian, so it's not you directly, but that you've had, and it's also probably not that different from most prime ministers we've had since at least Thatcher, junta. So no, it's not a surprise, but yeah, it's quite a complex question, that one. So.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It seems that as time goes on, for me, I mean, it seems like we're breaking down instead of getting smarter. Or is it that the right is just becoming more stronger? People are again willing to idealize the right as being sort of like a direction, or is it just that we didn't really notice the strength of the possibilities before? I've always thought that the left would always win out in the end. The sort of as you were speaking about full automation of society, and it sort of seemed like at the time when the miners were making a sort of stance as being like the last stance of the human division, is sort of like being aware that there's change coming and there's things happening that unless we are aware of these type of things coming, like automation and sort of like radicalism of the right, it kind of like I mean, I don't know. Now I seek music for peace. It's fine. I don't go looking for music that wants to set me off anymore, really. I'm looking for some sort of escape.
You're getting old.
Yeah, ancient. I mean, do you find that making music is like, I know that you you had you ran a full sort of course, as you will say, with band members and history, making albums. I love the Spike. Your work with Tanza and Julian Gilbert.
Mm.
That's something that you like. It kind of seems like you had a great partnership with them. Is that something that is? Do you guys ever speak, or is it still an ongoing relationship of friends, or do you guys ever speak about this?
Yeah, I know Julian well. He's living in Poland. He may be watching to this as we speak. Steve, yeah, he was quite a difficult character, but yeah, I mean, I think that there's a certain chemistry with bands. I mean, everyone knows this kind of story. There's kind of chemistry that works, whether or not the people are that close in a way. But yeah, I mean, I think when we lived at the ambulance station, it was very kind of communal. It was very obsessive. It was very focused, and we kind of lived it day by day. So it was pretty intense, I think. And for that, it imploded fairly quickly, or so that particular lineup, But I think that's good. I think it's once that kind of chemistry has dissipated, there's no point trying to reignite it. I think it's then it's time to move on. But yeah,
do you think that's how it is? Bands just run their course, and you run with it until you might feel that you're retracing ideas, or?
Oh God, yeah, of course it is. Yeah, I mean, I think there should be a legal limit that you can get about 3 years, maybe 4 years max, and then you have to hand in your instruments to some kind of authority.
I don't know.
Well, of course, yeah, you're still going, right?
I think it might seem like to the band, like, okay, we're retracing all the steps, but I guess by then it's like you've just developed your style definitively. I mean, I listened to this album last night and I hadn't listened to it for a while, and I remember when I first heard it, I thought like, it wasn't one that I understood as much as the other ones right away. But last night, man, it was really hit me just like no differently than the others. And I thought like, wait, this is the same band I love, the same chemistry. And it's kind of like you never veered off the consistency of Bourbonese Qualk. When the other guys went their own way and you found yourself in a situation with Miles, like kind of like creating Bourbonese Qualk, sort of like in an indifferent sort of sense. Did it feel like that things had changed too much at that point?
Yeah, I mean, there was a kind of fairly decisive split when Steve left. That was a very clear kind of fairly difficult break, which was good, I think, because then it made me kind of rethink, what to do. And at that point, so I didn't have any equipment or anything left. I had basically zero. But what we started doing was performing live because we couldn't record. So we played live basically for like a couple of years, and became a very tight, really good live band. And then acquired enough equipment again to actually record it. So it was a very different way of looking at it, I think. But this, along the same lines, again, very kind of political, very involved in activism, and we'd always performed a lot, but we're now kind of performing maybe 3 months solid in every year, so we built up this whole network of I don't know what you call them, social centers and so on. And it was a very kind of active time.
I really wish I could have seen you guys. There is a word that you came over to the United States and did some shows. Was that later that happened?
Yeah, that was 90, I guess, 1990. Look at that haircut. That's good.
Always great imagery. So what was your thoughts about America when you came over? Where did you end up playing?
What do you think of America?
Yeah.
The immediate thing that we thought struck us was that it was racially divided, which at the time in Bourbonese Qualk, a lot of our kind of crew and people and friends were, black from Liverpool, and going to America, and it seemed like kind of so ghettoized. That was really shocking. But we played to an entirely white audience,
right?
Or wherever, it'd be entirely white, and that was immediately striking. And I think also the sort of, is it fair to say, a sort of naivety about music?
Sure.
There was a kind of, there was a very kind of unsubtle sort of interpretation of what we were doing, which I think, in UK or in Europe, people are used to analysing in a much more subtle way. Whereas in America, I think it was much more about how it sounded, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Did it affect you guys at all in the sense of how you might be? I mean, I guess it's at a time like that one questions how you're being perceived. Did it matter?
No. I mean, again, the audience is there to be provoked.
Great.
If you can use whatever tools you can. But I mean, this is quite a later date. This is so I think the end of, like, you could say, the second version of Bourbonese Qualk. We were we ended up being quite a big unit. So we had like 3 big buses, and like rehearsal space on the buses and recording studios on the buses, and like a crew of 11 people. And we were touring all the time and stuff. And it became a bit much, because I was writing everything. I was performing. I was doing the tour organization. I was doing the tour management. I was even the mechanic of the bus, So I was doing all these roles, and I just decided it was all a bit much. And that was about the same time that kind of rave started, like acid rave started. And suddenly there was people doing performances of electronic music with just a drum machine and a 303. And what we were doing just seemed really anachronistic. It seemed really over heavy and kind of much more complex than it needs to be. So I kind of packed it in. So I just stopped. And that's where there's an album called Autonomia, which was basically the result of that period, which was a kind of like Euro gabber techno noise album. And that's what we did in America. But I don't know, it was all kind of a bit out of sync, because in America, they were all into this sort of happy rave with their glow sticks and their kind of psychedelic t-shirts and stuff. And we were doing this sort of noisy, loud, fast techno, and they didn't really know what to do about it. So yeah, that was quite interesting.
It definitely felt like a new page change, I guess, when you've got such a vibrant scene coming alive, and then artists actively getting involved, Psychic TV or whatever, getting into the acid house scene and the whole rest of rise of that underground and raves and stuff. And then I know that you went through the unfortunate loss of a band member under tragic circumstances, which I've also gone through 3 times myself. So I do know how that can affect you. And after that, you took a step away from making music for quite some time to, I guess, like have to accept a form of reality.
Well, yeah, I mean, when Miles died, basically I stopped the band, as a kind of mark of respect, because he was very central to it. But I think also that it had kind of run its course. I think it would have been pointless to have just kind of restarted it and under a new name and recruited a bunch of people. So yeah, that I killed that off. but also by then I had a child. I was running my own kind of technology business, which had become very successful, and things had changed a lot. So it seemed like an opportune moment to stop that. I mean, we and I always did continue doing music, but just never released it, never showed anyone, which was, again, it's quite normal way of behaving, really, as far as I'm concerned.
I think that's great that you went from everything, manager, label, recluse organization founder, your label, as you said, bus mechanic, everything, and then you still had time to become a digital creative director or a strategist.
Yeah, I mean, I did all sorts of different things, but yeah, basically, it was an early kind of internet agency, so we did all sorts of internet web-based content and yeah, all sorts of things. But I ended up as being a kind of a big creative director in advertising agencies. But
is
then,
is that something you dove into as a result of feeling the way you felt when you weren't making music, or was this something that you were dipping into along the way already?
I mean, I've always been really interested in technology. I mean, I kind of came into it through music because I started using computers for music. And of course, you can do other things with computers, and I've always been involved in kind of visual arts and design and so. So I did that and realized that, people will give you a lot of money for doing that. So it seemed, because I've been poor basically all of my life, I thought, right, I'll cash in on this for a few years and then make some money, which is what I did. And but I stayed a bit too, I think looking back, probably a bit too long doing it, but they kept on throwing more and more money at me. So how can I stop?
At least you're doing something that you kind of like worked your way up at being great at. Were you the guy that always did the album covers and stuff as well? Graphic artist as well?
Yeah.
All these photographs and stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. And then it's not like you took the easy way. It's like kind of like strolling into super collider language and computer music. It wasn't like the most easiest approach.
Yeah, but I think, going back to, and I've been warned that you're a kind of fan of gear and technology and stuff. But I mean, I think it's really important to have maybe not limitations that you set yourself, but limitations that are imposed on you. So, having no money to buy gear actually produces probably better music than if you had lots of fancy stuff. I mean, I think if someone had given us a Jupiter 8 or some fancy equipment in the 80s, it would have been a bit shit. I think the music would have been worse for it. I think, we achieved a certain sound because that's all we could do. We were always fighting against the limitations of the equipment. And I think, with computer musical programming languages, again, it's the limitations on how skilled you are at knowing that computer language. But I think the computer music or computer programming is that there's not many creatives involved at that level. So actually, I think I can get better things out of it than most people who are very fluent at those languages. At least that's my excuse anyway. Yeah.
I think the results that I'm hearing that you're making still have your style, computer or no computer. That's the great thing. So when you approach the computer, what is it that you like to use these days when you want to make a tune? Do you have a DAW that you like to open, or?
I mean, again, I'm very agnostic when it comes to equipment. I mean, it's all down whatever works, really.
Yeah.
I use Ableton Live as the kind of basic tool. I use Zebra as a synth, and I use other programming stuff that goes in there. But I mean, that all sounds kind of, if someone's listening to this and they think, oh, that sounds complicated. It's not. It's actually very simple. I mean, all I do is I mess around with stuff, and if it sounds good, I use it. If it doesn't, then I don't. I mean, that's always been the case, and it could be anything as simple as getting a bit of feedback, or recording a seagull like the one out there. So it doesn't matter. I mean, the equipment does not matter at all. I mean, but it has become a much easier to get a kind of cleaner, sharper sound. It's easier now to manipulate stuff, which is good. Which I think is a really, really good thing. And everyone should do it, and not just listen to stuff on Spotify, but do things themselves.
Absolutely. I don't know, approaching computers can be really intimidating, but I guess the goal is to not see the tool as your the main focus, as much as like that tape recorder, how you can get the sound out of it and record it. And
yeah, but I think it's a state of mind. I mean, you could say it's intimidating because people expect you to come up with something that they recognize as being music. But if you change it and you think, well, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to do with it whatever I want, then it's a complete change of attitude, and it's a much better attitude, which is, yeah, you're in control of it.
But you didn't hang on to any of the old equipment, though. That's I mean, I always found that like one of the best things was hanging on to that old gear, because I mean, it's just absurd to think about how the value of, like, say, Nigel's 808. You borrowed it at a certain time, and now people are paying like $8,000 to $10,000 for these things. It's crazy. Just to utilize something that we consider to be, let's get that, and
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, we were always frustrated with the 808 because it was kind of boring sounding, really. I mean, it's all we had. I mean, it wasn't that good, was it? Really, it's just like a kind of.
It's just basic. It's not like it does something. Well, I mean, it's legendary now probably because of the legend of it. But
it's only because of the kind of capitalistic hype that's surrounding it. I mean, that's the same with houses, isn't it? Houses are only expensive because people tell you that you need to pay millions of pounds for a house. It's not because they're actually intrinsically worth it. But I've never quite understood this sort of nostalgia thing as well, which is, so I don't have any records or CDs or a record player or anything like that. I've never bought a record since I was like 15.
Wow, that's admirable, actually, I think. Well, what do you do when you listen to something? How do you access it? It just hits you somewhere outside?
Well, online or I don't. But so I've never really understood this kind of nostalgia for the 80s or the 90s or whatever, You
know what it is? Is that nothing's come along and been better. The pureness of really the music.
Yeah, but you say that because that was your time of growing up, right? I mean, sure. Someone born in the 90s will say that about the 90s. Someone born in 2000 say about 2000. So it is everyone has their time, I think.
I think you're absolutely right. We were affected in a profound way by something we felt a part of, and that's probably what it was. Forgive me for being nostalgic. That's probably truly what it is. But there was something captivating about the music you make too. So I wouldn't want to regard it fully as nostalgia, making reference back to it. I still think the production techniques and something are as admirable as looking back upon dub, or as say, for instance, looking back upon, say, the basic channel scene. When it first started, I thought like, wow, wait, here's something that's happening that's less is more theory being applied to music in an effective way that's really making a statement again at that point. Did that have any effect on you, that period?
Which period?
The basic channel, sort of Maurizio von Oswald period, Chain Reaction. It was kind of like a minimalist German sort of like revision look at dub or minimalist electronic music. But I was really found it to be.
So I guess the problem with not buying records and stuff is I've got no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, good. I'll have to send you a link then. No, but one thing that I really have to say is that I really enjoyed you recently sent me Big Daddy. I guess, is that going to be the name of your next solo album?
Well, no, it's not solo. It's me and Fritz Catlin, who is and was the drummer from 23 Skidoo.
Oh, right.
Who's he's not a neighbour, but he's very close. He's over the hill here. So he lives in the same town, and I guess I kind of forced him to play live with me a few times when I was doing this kind of solo performance stuff. And then we started a separate project called Big Daddy, which is the two of us. And yeah, Big Daddy, by the way, was a famous English wrestler who was basically from my family back in the day.
Nice. So, I thought it was great. What does that come out in June, or I saw that it's not?
Yeah, June. Yeah,
everyone's going to enjoy that. It's very good. And also Invisible Cities. You forwarded me that. I also enjoyed that. Is that the new solo album?
That's solo work. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. With various different people involved, but yeah, that's solo stuff.
I really enjoyed it, but I also like your approach again to. I don't know. It seems like the way that I had thought that maybe you were inspired by the basic channel era, because some techniques in the sound is like kind of like expresses like kind of like a dubby-esque sort of approach. Had somewhere along the way, had you ever been inspired by dub?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, when I was like a callow youth in Liverpool, that's all I listened to was dub. You know, like Scientists and
oh my God, yeah,
Tubby and Augustus Pablo, and that's all I listened to. And I kind of over-listened to it. Now I can't really listen to it anymore because I sort of broke myself listening to it. But yeah, I mean, that was much more influential on me than probably any other genre. So, you know, which is basically you have like a kind of bassy, repetitive rhythm and a little kind of noise over the top. And that's the formula, you know, that's what we were doing in Bourbonese Qualk, really. That was all about dub than anything else. So yeah,
I'm glad to discover that. It had to come from somewhere, and I think I found the source here.
yeah. Well, if anything, yeah, that's definitely where it came from. You know.
Dub background, and then hanging out with Nigel.
Yeah, he's to blame.
You got to love Nigel. I mean, Nocturnal Emissions. Nocturnal Emissions and you guys, I always said, would probably be one of the greatest gigs to ever happen. And then someone sent me this from Germany one day.
Yeah.
So I hear that you guys unfortunately couldn't make the show, or someone.
No, Van blew up. Yeah, we missed him.
But I mean, there's the ideal bill right there. I mean, I thought, and I've been working with Edward for some nearly 30 years as well. So,
right, yeah.
His perspective and everything on the whole scene has been the same as yours about equipment and working with what you got and getting the best results. And
but they were posh compared to us. They had all sorts of fancy gear.
Absolutely, they did. Yeah, they had a CS30 even, all that stuff. Oh, Mark Spivey, ex-Soviet France, comments, Big Daddy's real name was Shirley Crabtree.
Exactly, yeah.
Are you related?
Yeah, he was my kind of great uncle or something, yeah.
That is awesome.
Have you never seen a picture of him?
Yeah, I think he's on the thing where you forwarded me the link.
Yeah.
The thing. I don't have it handy here, but I guess people will see it. Will he be on the cover?
Ooh, I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, he was basically a miner from Barnsley, you know, which is in Yorkshire, and he was very overweight, and yeah, it was a very particular Northern British culture at the time.
So your last album before this, The Demand Full Automation, is kind of like the fear, as we were talking about earlier, the dystopian future. We better learn to control automation before automation is controlling us. I think that's like a pretty valid statement and great concept. The album is again, like, I just love it. And, you know, kind of like combining that with your album before that with After America, the sounds of where you're going, like, say the song Cobra Mist, can you illuminate as to what sort of sounds how you're making these sounds? They're like these glorious sort of mellotronish sort of paddy sounds, but they're not the typical.
I don't know. It just happens. I don't have a formula. I mean, I can't really say, oh yeah, I can't even think of a synthesizer, but a particular synthesizer. It's all sorts of stuff kind of jumbled up and messed around with. And there's certain sounds I would definitely avoid, kind of overly synthetic, kind of filter sweepy, that kind of stuff. I guess I'm interested in electronics when the confusion of the organic and the synthetic, if you like. How about that?
That's great. So you mean you still don't have the fetish somewhere in your mind to find a tritonium?
I mean, I've found loads of tritoniums, but no, I mean, they weren't very good.
Have you really found one?
Yeah. Well, I've just finished I think I told you, a PhD in electronic music in the Weimar Republic. So I am now Dr. Crab, as well as being Big Daddy. So yeah, I did a lot of research in Berlin, unearthing all sorts of early electronic instruments. But I mean, it's not particularly about how the instruments work. It's more about the ideas associated with them.
Yeah,
that I was more interested in.
And the Variophone, 1932.
Yeah, that was a light-based synthesizer, Russian light-based synthesizer.
It's quite amazing how seemingly futuristic the first synthesizers really were. I mean, there's like kind of like touching upon like spaceship stuff. What's your?
Well, I mean, my interest was actually proving that the opposite of that they actually weren't futuristic. They were using ideas based on the 19th century kind of romanticism. So they were more about irrationalism than they were about the kind of supposed rationalism of modernity.
That's interesting. Is there somewhere where we can read that thesis?
Yeah, but I'm rewriting it as a book, so there'll be a book coming out about it soon. So it's
wow.
Basically electronic music and fascism in the 1930s Germany.
That's something that I'll be very interested in. Definitely keep me aware of that. Well, is there any? Do you stray outside of the Soviet synth world as far as the studies are concerned, or is it?
Well, no, this was all about German electronic music in the 1920s and 30s.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, well, you've seen the 120 Years site, which is the basically history of electronic music going back to 1880 something. So yeah, that's which ironically is about hardware and instruments. But again, my interest is not really in the physical things. It's about the ideas that either cause it to happen or happen because of it. Absolutely.
You've always sort of like delved kind of into ethnic instruments and like the sort of like approach that something in different instruments might have. Are you still like delving into instruments of ethnic instruments, gamelan? And
yeah. Well, I mean, I used to, until quite recently, play in a gamelan orchestra, but I'm kind of I avoid using any kind of direct use of that in my own music. I mean, but it's kind of inevitable that you kind of get influenced by rhythms, certain types of rhythms and structures and kind of compositions. But I kind of avoid what I call doing the Muslim gauze, which is having a bit of funky music and then putting some bit of Arabic stuff over the top. But yeah, I play. There's a baglama in the background, which is a Turkish saz.
Nice.
Which I play in the oud, which is an Arabic lute sort of thing. But I would never use it on recordings,
Will it eventually find its way into a recording, or is this a separate world entity?
a different thing. It's a totally different world. I think as soon as you do put it on, it kind of changes the context as well. It suddenly sounds like someone's preconceived ideas of what Turkish or Arabic music is. And it's kind of unnecessary, you know. I think there's better ways of doing it. It gives it a sort of easy veneer or kind of mystical Orientalism, you know, which I want to avoid.
I was totally blown away just saying by this VOD box set. I thought I'd heard everything, and then when I heard this, my friend Paul and I, who's on the side right now, by the way, hi Paul, we were just totally blown away by this. And so if anybody thinks they've heard all of the Bourbonese Qualk catalog, see if you can go and find this. My wife has stolen the t-shirt out of it. It didn't fit. But it comes with everything, and I just can't recommend it enough. You know that I actually have your autograph? You guys signed a poster for me.
Well, you could cash some of my checks.
Cash that
in.
Look
at that. Oh, yeah.
The Bourbonese Qualk poster.
We almost got arrested for that.
What's next, Simon? You've made a couple of albums that are coming out. That's got to feel great. What's next on your list?
Well, it's quite a long list, right? I've got a book. I've got a solo album, double vinyl solo album, double vinyl side project, Big Daddy. That's quite a lot. How much more do you want?
It's a lot. It's a lot. When can we expect the book? It's kind of exciting to think about.
Well, I've got to write it first. Publishers are very slow as well, so it's probably going to be next year or something like that. But I have to warn you, it's quite academic. It's not like it's not it's not easy reading. But
well, that's okay.
Yeah.
What about? I noticed that you've also been delving into video work. Was this one of your videos, with the beautiful flowers?
Oh yeah, that's pretty basic. No, I'm doing a lot of work with programming, coding art, if you like, and some of that's video, but most of it's 2D stuff. And I've built a robot that draws. So in the background, you can see these drawings. That's basically a programmed robot that draws the designs. So I'm doing a lot of that kind of generative art stuff. But I'm planning now to do like a big robot that will do a kind of wall-sized drawing. So for like kind of public stuff.
That's nice.
Those kind of things. That's all going on.
What are your thoughts on AI as far as, like, you notice that these days they've got AI that are recomposing based on, say, something you may have written, and then they'll analyze it and then restructure.
Well, I mean, I guess it goes back to the idea of automation. So, as you eloquently put it, you know, you have a decision to make, which is society going to be automated to the benefit of the ruling classes, or is it going to be to the benefit of ourselves to have a workless future, cooperative future? The same with the AI, which is, so Spotify is investing millions in generating pop music through algorithmic processes. So basically how people search for music is going to actually determine the music they get, and it will be generated on the fly by algorithms. You know, which is really interesting, but it just means you're going to end up with a very a type of music which is determined by search algorithms, and we know where that ends up. But you can use AI for all sorts of other things. So I think it's very interesting that the next generation of synthesis is going to be AI based. And so basically you can ask a synthesizer, what would a string section mixed with a drum kit sound like? And it'll come back with its best interpretation of that. And what's interesting about it is all the mistakes that it's going to make. It's because, of course, it's not thinking the same way that we're thinking. And it'll be coming back with something that's really fascinating, you know. So that's great. You know, it opens up a whole area of a new way of looking at synthesis. I mean, I think, you know, the synthesizers, what was always interesting was the mistakes they made, not that it imitated a violin or a drum machine like or a drum like a 808. There was always the bits in between where it got it wrong that was most interesting. So
the beauty of imperfection.
Well, it wasn't about imperfection. It was about looking for the. I guess I've always been interested trying to get machines to do what they were never designed to do. You know, so basically, synthesizers were designed to imitate other instruments.
Right.
But as a side effect, they did all sorts of other kind of crazy stuff as well, which you could exploit. So yeah, I think that's. But did that answer the question? I'm not sure it did.
Yeah, it's kind of. I mean, Richard Devine, I was speaking to him recently, and he was talking about getting the opportunity to work with AI and trying to confuse them and baffle them with odd time signatures and such. But he said that they were fairly capable. But I think, like, I as well appreciate that aesthetic of trying to basically see what nice mistakes they could make, and so on. You had a period where you were giving away all the Bourbonese Qualk recordings MP3, but now it's properly stored up on Bandcamp. People can find your whole catalog up there at Bourbonese Qualk Bandcamp. Also, I'll put the link in the description. Also, your archive is at Bourbonese Qualk.
Yeah, you can also steal it from various places as well. So that's good.
I think you can watch it on YouTube, all sorts of things.
Help yourself, you know.
And then your solo stuff is also, I'm going to post a link to the Simon Crab Bandcamp, where you can get your After American Demand Full Automation and your Big Daddy and Invisible Cities coming out. Is that where they'll be able to find that?
Yeah, sure.
I was once on a show here where they ask you, you know, what's your favorite records? Had me on. I was like, what's in my bag? It's called. So in case you didn't see it, there you go, sir. I still think it's an absolute gem. You are a genius to me. I tout you in the list of my favorite musicians. So don't ever doubt yourself. Continue being you, sir. And since you touch my soul with everything you do, feel free to contact me if you ever need an extra hand.
All right. What do you do?
On your crew of 11. I can help you with the bus mechanics.
All right. You're on.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me. I know it's evening time there. So cheers to you, sir. Have a best to you and your family. Have a great evening. And thank you once again for joining us.
Nice to talk. Yeah.
All right. Hope we speak soon. Till then.